This is an original Volkswagen Audi intake that was on the car. This is the replacement Volkswagen updated, changed, and slightly different intake. Okay, today I'm going to be working on a 2009 Audi A3. This is a 2.0 TSI motor, which is also commonly referred to as a CBF. So a lot of you Audi Volkswagen guys already know that there's several different engines for these cars. And every time you try to order parts, they want to know, is it a CBFA or a CBF or a FSI? So all these acronyms, you want to basically put that to rest by looking for this decal right here, so CBF. I believe these motors were made from 2008 and a half up to about 2013 and a half. So I've done a lot of work on the car. Basically just did a full service on it, spark plugs, water pump, carbon cleaning. Oh my gosh, carbon cleaning. Inside the valves, they were terrible. So while I did that, I switched over to a newer style intake, which was an aftermarket. I had it in stock. Once I did that, I got a check engine light. So let's go take a look at what the check engine light says. I normally use a different type of software to diagnose my vehicles. I was in one of the stores the other day, one of the box stores, and I just happened to see this scanner. So I thought, well, you know, let me give it a try. And I noticed it said domestic, Asian, and Euro vehicles. So I'm like, alright, let's see if this will talk to an Audi. So, nice little device, handheld, typical OBD2 style plug. So let's see what it does. Going to turn the key to the run position so that it can talk to the vehicle. And supposedly, I guess this auto link is going to detect which vehicle this is and actually connect to it. And it does. And voila, look at what we got there. P215 intake manifold runner, position sensor, and then we also have bank 1 circuit range performance. So that's going to be some oxygen sensor type stuff. So we're mainly concerned about the intake right now, because I have never had the intake manifold runner position sensor throw a code before. Now what I did do was I switched over to an aftermarket intake. In the aftermarket intake, I was reading they're not the original Volkswagen Audi group intakes, and they can cause problems for some of you guys with these TSI motors. So I went ahead, went online, did some research, and I found out Volkswagen made an updated TSI intake. So that's going to be fantastic. So I've got the two intakes sitting on my toolbox, so we'll go take a look at those. And right now we'll pull the car in the shop. So as I told you guys earlier, done a bunch of work to it. So basically, it was time for new spark plugs. Everybody's wondering. These were put in around 70,000 miles. So we're at 163,000 right now. So notice some different discoloration, some things going on there, which I attribute to the intake in the intake valves. A lot of the carbon that was built up inside this engine was crazy. So if you take a look here at the intake, this is the intake I pulled off, and you can see the carbon that was starting to build up, and it just got worse as it got to the valves. This is an original Volkswagen Audi intake that was on the car. This is the replacement Volkswagen updated, changed, and slightly different intake. If you notice in here in the runners, they've actually got like little stops back in the back corners. I don't know if you can see them or not, compared to the old style intake. The old style intake didn't really have positive stops, and here's where I suspect my problem is. So if you look on the end of these intakes, there is a position switch. This tells the computer or the ECU where the relationship of this flap is. And I suspect that my aftermarket intake is in a different range, or it's giving a different range value to the computer, therefore throwing the light. Because the intake was very functional, but it was slightly different in the type of plastic and the casting. So that's why I decided to go with an original Volkswagen, and this is the updated intake. So we're going to give that a try in a little bit. But just to show you guys, while we were in there, went ahead and changed out the water pump. This is an original plastic water pump. This pump made it 163,000 miles. They are driven, for those of you guys that don't know, they are driven by a little tiny belt. This belt is also 160,000 miles. It's actually holding up pretty good. Now the trauma that was right here, that was me trying to get the belt off. So, turn this little dude around. There is a little pulley that drives off of one of the shafts, an intermediate shaft inside the engine, and there is a bolt that goes through that shaft. You have to remove this bolt and take this little pulley off to get this belt off, to get this water pump out. Now, I almost messed up. This bolt is left-handed thread. You cannot do the righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. That won't work for you. This is a left-handed thread bolt. So, fortunately, the new water pump came with a new bolt and also came with this little guy. This is a plastic. I could see failure written all over this. It's plastic, it's O-ringed, it goes to a little oil cooler and it fits right in here like this. The new water pump that I ordered, I got the aluminum housing, and it came with a machined, real nice fitting aluminum, I guess, adapter and new O-rings. So I installed all that, everything's working great. So right now, this is where we've got, basically, this is all put together probably within the last 1,000 miles of doing this service. As you also notice, I have a catch can and a deleted PCV system. And I think this was just recently put on, so I didn't really have a factor with helping to keep the valves clean. So we're going to find out how that does. And if you have ever installed a catch can and you want to see what is actually going through your engine, this is what would be going and getting ingested into the valves, and which is now getting captured in this can. So when it's time for service and an oil change, you merely empty this can. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to go after this intake and we are going to change it to the updated Volkswagen intake, which is going to replace it. Intake is off, and we're going to see what we can find here. Now keep in mind, 500 miles ago I was inside this engine cleaning the valves, so I didn't think I'd be revisiting this intake again, but here we are. So it's been 500 miles, so this is a good test. So let's see what our catch can and our PCV delete did. So after 500 miles, I know that's not very much, but let's just see what the oil accumulation will be. So we're going to pull the dividers out. And these were perfectly clean when I put them in the car. There is a little bit of moisture of oil residue on them. So let's continue to pull these out. Not too bad. So let's take a look at the valves. See if we can get in there and actually see in the port. Now these were cleaned 500 miles ago. So let me see if I can get in here. We do have a little bit of stuff starting to accumulate. Definitely. That was not there. So, if we look over here at the catch can, this was emptied and cleaned also. So within 500 miles, this is what the catch can has accumulated. And it's basically probably about 3/4 of an inch worth of material from inside the engine. The reason why it's milky is there is a lot of moisture and condensation in engines. So that would be pretty much normal. But once again, this would have been going through the engine. Now the one thing I don't know is how much of that oil was trapped in the intercooler. So the intercooler and the piping could also have oil in them right now left over from when this PCV system was dumping all that oil and all the vapors into the intercooler. So this could be some residual that's just coming out. So let's take a look at the intake. Okay, this is the intake I removed. I want to take a look, and I'm curious to see how much oil is in here. This was a brand new intake. Now keep in mind, this is still the aftermarket one. This is not a German-made one, as far as I know. It is slightly different than the original, but it was clean. There was no oil in it. So let's see if there's any oil and see if we can figure out maybe where that oil is coming from on those valves. This was perfect. This was perfectly clean when I put it together. So there's a little bit of moisture in here, just a little bit. And that leads me to wonder, is some of this oil left over from the intercooler? What was left in the piping and the tubing, because I know there's oil in there, and possibly the valve guides and the valve seals in the engine. They could be also causing that accumulation on the valves themselves more than just the intake feeding it. Once again, this engine has 163,000 miles on it, and there is oil residual. See this little bit? There is oil here. So I think still some of this might be coming from the crankcase. It might be coming from somewhere else. But this is once again after 500 miles. So with a catch can. Okay, let's see if that looks a little better. Like I said, 163,000, so we'll run it back. Okay, got her all buttoned up, everything checked. Always check these electrical connections, these hose connections. Volkswagen, Audi, they have these little special little push down, and usually if you push in while you push down, then they will slide off of there. But always make sure they're pushed in, because that will cause you problems. You'll hear it click. Good, positive. So I'm just checking everything, making sure everything's good. Battery's hooked back up. I like to disconnect the battery before I start working on electrical stuff, just in case. It's good cautionary measure. So right now we're going to see if that code, if we can clear it, and then see if it will come back. Okay, we're going to let this thing detect the vehicle. The key is on. And intake manifold runner. Now supposedly we can push this red button and it will clear codes. Erasing clears all DTCs, freeze frame data, blah blah blah. Are you sure? Yes. One moment. Erase was successful. We're going to turn the vehicle off and we're going to unplug. And then we are going to start the vehicle. Always make sure all your check engine lights, everything come on initially when you hit the key, and if everything's good, they will go away after it starts. So if you notice, there's ESP fault. That is electronic stability control. Basically, it's wheel speed sensors and this electric steering. So if you turn the wheel to the left, turn it to the right, they will usually reset themselves just like that. Once it sees movement in both directions, it will set itself. So now, notice we have no check engine lights. Everything should be good to go. It is showing the hood is open. Initially, when I first put this aftermarket intake on, as soon as you touch the accelerator, you would get a check engine light immediately. And that code was showing intake flap runner. So we are going to try to accelerate. And we are not getting any codes. So, one other test. We need to take this thing out and send it down the dirt road here. So we'll do that here in a second. Alright y'all, this has been a great little project. I hope you got something out of this. Fun to work on, fun to drive. See you next time.